The studio lights burned hot, casting a stage for a political clash that would soon take over America's feeds. Kellyanne Conway sat across from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, her expression already tight with anger before the cameras even rolled. Within 30 seconds, the contrast between fury and composure would shatter expectations, and the internet. Conway, the longtime Trump counselor known for her verbal brawls, came armed for war. Her voice cracked as she leaned forward, blonde hair whipping with her gestures. "You think you can lecture me about politics? You're nothing but a freshman who doesn't know her place." Crockett didn't flinch. Dressed in a simple navy blazer, hands folded, she radiated calm authority. Her response was quiet, but cutting, so measured, so devastating, that the studio fell into stunned silence. By nightfall, millions would watch the clip, calling it the most unforgettable political takedown of the year. To understand why it mattered, you had to know the players. Conway, 57, is a seasoned political warrior, Trump's former campaign manager and White House counselor, famous for her sharp tongue and defiance under fire. She entered the studio armed with binders of talking points and a lifetime of combat experience. Crockett, 42, represents something different. A public defender turned civil rights attorney. She built her career by listening more than shouting, by holding her ground without raising her voice. Where Conway relied on aggression, Crockett's power came from poise, and it was about to change everything. The debate topic, voting rights, was already explosive, but this moment was about more than policy. It was a collision of two philosophies, the old-school belief that politics is won by being the loudest versus a new model of leadership built on calm, clarity, and truth. As the host tried to soften the tension with easy questions, Conway lunged. But Crockett? She leaned back, steady and unshaken, ready to show America a different kind of strength. Kellyanne Conway came into the studio expecting a fight. Her plan was textbook Conway. Flood Jasmine Crockett with rapid-fire accusations, keep her on defense, and remind viewers that experience always trumps youth. It was a tactic that had worked for decades. Until now. From the moment the cameras rolled, Conway lunged. "This so-called voting rights bill is nothing but a federal takeover," she snapped, her voice already climbing. "I'm tired of freshmen, politicians like Miss Crockett, pretending they understand election law." Crockett didn't move, hands folded, a calm smile. "Thank you, Kellyanne. I appreciate your perspective." That single measured response sent Conway into overdrive. "Don't patronize me, Congresswoman. I was running presidential campaigns when you were still in law school." Crockett tilted her head slightly. "Then you should have plenty of examples. What specific evidence of fraud concerns you?" For the first time, Conway hesitated. She raised her voice, rattling off familiar talking points. Dead people voting, illegals voting, ballot harvesting. But the more she shouted, the more Crockett's composure exposed the weakness in her argument. Behind the cameras, the crew exchanged knowing looks. Social media lit up in real time. Crockett is ice cold. "This is hard to watch." "Kellyanne's losing it," the host tried to steer back to policy, but Conway cut him off. "This woman," she jabbed a finger across the desk, "has been in Congress for 2 years and thinks she can lecture me." Crockett calmly sipped her water, then placed her notes on the table. "Passion is important," she said evenly. "But I think our viewers deserve facts, not just talking points. Which specific provision of the bill concerns you?" "I have the text here." Conway slammed her hand on the desk. "Don't play games with me. This bill eliminates voter ID, allows ballot harvesting, and prevents states from cleaning voter rolls. It's chaos." Crockett didn't blink. Actually, the bill strengthens voter ID by ensuring every American has free access to identification. It doesn't eliminate requirements. It makes them fairer. Would you like me to show you the section? The contrast was undeniable. One woman red-faced, trembling with fury, the other calm, precise, and unshaken. And in that moment, the audience knew. They weren't just watching a debate. They were watching a generational shift in political power. Democrats want to cheat! That's your agenda! Conway screamed, her pitch climbing so high the sound engineers winced. You want to flood the system with illegal votes so you can cling to power? That's what this is really about. The studio fell silent except for Conway's ragged breathing. She had just accused a sitting congresswoman of orchestrating election fraud on live television. Even Conway seemed to realize she'd gone too far. Crockett didn't flinch. She let the silence linger, then answered in the same measured tone she'd used all night. Kellyanne, I took an oath to defend the Constitution. Every vote I cast, every bill I support, is guided by that oath, and by my duty to the people who elected me. Democracy is strongest when more eligible Americans can take part in it. Conway tried to pivot, her voice shaky. That's exactly the kind of polished political double talk I'm talking about. You say one thing, but you mean another. What do you think I mean? Crockett asked gently. Conway faltered. Her strategy had relied on pushing Crockett into a shouting match, something she could dominate. Instead, every calm question, every steady answer, every refusal to bite back made Conway appear more unhinged. The host tried to step in. Let's focus on the actual provisions of the bill. I don't need help, Conway snapped, cutting him off. She turned back toward Crockett, her voice dropping but still trembling with anger. You think you're so clever. You think that lawyer voice makes you look like the adult in the room. But I see through you. Crockett leaned in slightly, unshaken. What do you see, Kellyanne? I see a manipulator, Conway spat. Her hands shook as she jabbed the air. You come here acting calm and reasonable while pushing legislation that will destroy our democracy. Jen Crockett didn't rise to the bait. What specific provision of the bill are you referring to? She asked, reaching for the text of the legislation. Conway's eyes widened. Her anger had pushed her too far, and Crockett had just set the trap. Crockett nodded thoughtfully. You're right, Kellyanne. The Constitution doesn't say those things. What it does say, in the 14th and 15th Amendments, is that all citizens have the right to vote, and that right cannot be denied or abridged. The question is how we balance security with access. Conway slammed both hands on the desk, making her water glass rattle. Stop being so reasonable, she screamed. Stop acting like you're above this. I know who you really are. The studio froze. Conway had just shouted at someone for being reasonable. The absurdity of it hung in the air like smoke. Crockett let the silence breathe. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than ever, almost compassionate. Kellyanne, I can see you're upset, and I understand. These issues matter to you. They matter to me too. But we can disagree on policy without attacking each other's character. Conway blinked at her, caught off guard. For the first time, she didn't have a retort. You've spent this whole time telling me what you think I believe. Crockett continued, her voice steady. But you haven't asked me once what I actually believe, or why I support this bill. She leaned forward. I support it because I've seen what happens when people are denied the vote. As a public defender, I represented people who were disenfranchised by the system. I saw seniors who couldn't get IDs, Working parents, who couldn't afford to take off during limited voting hours. I don't support this bill because I want Democrats to win. I support it because I want democracy to win. Conway's voice dropped to a whisper. That's not what this bill does. Then help me understand what you think it does, Crockett said evenly. Not what you think my motives are. Show me the language that concerns you. Conway fumbled through her notes, rifling papers with growing desperation. The cameras captured every awkward second. Finally, she muttered, The provision about voter roll maintenance. States need to clean their rolls. I agree, Crockett said. This bill doesn't stop that. It just requires reliable data and notice before removal. Would you support that? Conway blinked. She had come for a fight, not a policy discussion. Well, notice is important, but the timeline. You're worried dead voters could stay on the rolls, Crockett prompted. Yes, Conway said quickly, clinging to the point. Crockett pulled out the bill. Actually, it requires immediate removal upon proof of death. Notice only applies to address changes. Want to see the section? Conway looked at the bill, then at Crockett, then back again. The fire in her eyes dimmed. I may have misunderstood that provision, she said quietly. The words hit like a confession. Kellyanne Conway, famous for never admitting fault, had just conceded she was wrong. Crockett's tone stayed calm, even kind. It's easy to misinterpret complex legislation if you're working from summaries instead of the text. That's why I always try to read the bills myself before I form an opinion. Conway nodded slowly, deflating in her chair. And that, Crockett said, her voice still gentle but now carrying absolute authority, is the difference between fighting for power and fighting for democracy. I think it's important, Crockett said evenly, that we ground these conversations in facts, not assumptions about each other's character. Because the moment we decide that people we disagree with are evil, stupid, or corrupt, we stop listening. And democracy cannot survive without listening. The host, who had been watching Conway's unraveling in stunned silence, finally spoke. Congresswoman Crockett, that's a powerful reminder about the importance of civil discourse. Conway seemed to remember where she was. Her voice was barely audible. I apologize if I got too heated. These issues are important to me. They're important to me too, Crockett replied, offering a warm smile. And that's exactly why we have to discuss them respectfully. The cameras caught it all. Conway's outburst, her faltering apology, and Crockett's quiet command of the moment. What began as an attempted ambush ended as a masterclass in composure, fact-based argument, and grace under fire. Within minutes, clips were flooding social media. Conway's shriek, "Stop being so reasonable," was instantly mehmed. But it wasn't the screaming that captivated the country. It was Crockett's response. Calm, factual, devastatingly effective. She had taken what was meant to be an attack on her credibility and turned it into a demonstration of the leadership voters craved. The so-called freshman who didn't know her place had just shown that sometimes the strongest rebuttal to someone shouting is to speak quietly and carry the truth. The transformation in the studio was palpable. When the cameras stopped rolling, Conway sat slumped in her chair, staring blankly at her notes. The woman who had entered confident and combative now looked drained, confused. Crockett, by contrast, simply gathered her papers with the same serene composure she had displayed all along. But the real explosion was happening online. Within 5 minutes, Jasmine Crockett was trending. Clips spread like wildfire. First, Conway's scream spliced with captions like, "When someone asks you to cite your sources." Others showed Crockett's calm stare, paired with the famous, "This is fine" meme. Yet the clip that truly went viral wasn't the comedy. It was the exchange where Conway accused Crockett of manipulation, and Crockett responded, steady and compassionate, about democracy and listening. A prominent civil rights lawyer shared it with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like in 2024. Calm, factual, focused on solutions, not spectacle." Even conservative commentators struggled to defend Conway's performance. One longtime Republican strategist tweeted, "I've known Kellyanne for years. This wasn't her best work. Crockett stayed calm, stuck to facts, and never raised her voice. That's political skill." The internet had turned Conway's meltdown into comedy gold. But the lasting image wasn't her anger. It was Jasmine Crockett, unshaken, showing America what steady leadership under pressure truly looked like. Crockett's unflappable composure in the middle of Conway's chaos became the internet's newest obsession. Memes spread instantly. Conway pointing and screaming was paired with captions like, "When the restaurant is out of your favorite dish," or "When Netflix cancels your show mid-season." But unlike most viral political takedowns, this wave wasn't built on mocking Conway. The spotlight was on Crockett. The most shared image showed her serene expression, captioned, "How to win an argument without raising your voice." It wasn't just humor. It was a teaching tool about communication wrapped in meme culture. News outlets scrambled to put the moment in context. A major newspaper headline read, "Congresswoman's calm response to screaming opponent goes viral, sparks national discourse." Analysts noted how Crockett had transformed what was meant to be an ambush into a real-time lesson in democracy. Cable shows dissected the Crockett method, responding to aggression with calm, fact-based precision rather than shouting back. Even late-night comedy joined in. One host quipped, "Kellyanne Conway literally yelled at someone for being too reasonable. That's like getting mad at someone for being too polite or too prepared." Conway tried to do damage control on social media, framing the exchange as a spirited discussion, where her passion came across as intensity. But replies were merciless. "Kellyanne, yelling at someone for being reasonable isn't passion. It's poor behavior." The narrative was set. Crockett had stayed composed. Conway had unraveled. For Jasmine Crockett, the viral moment was both a breakthrough and a responsibility. She gained millions of new followers overnight. Her response? A short, steady video. "Thank you to everyone who watched today's discussion. This is why facts and respect matter, even when we disagree. Democracy works best when we listen to each other." The message exploded across platforms with comments like, "This is the kind of leadership we need, and strong without being loud." And it wasn't just America watching. International media picked up the clip. A European paper ran the headline, "American Debate, When Shouting Meets Silence." Analysts abroad contrasted Crockett's calm authority with Conway's aggression, framing it as a case study in political communication. Universities quickly adopted the moment into classrooms. Political science courses dissected it as a model of effective debate. Psychology departments analyzed Crockett's emotional regulation. One prominent university published a paper titled, "The Crockett Method: Calm Authority as Political Strategy." Communication schools began teaching her technique as the new standard for handling hostile questions. What was meant to be a takedown of a young congresswoman had instead birthed a new blueprint for political discourse, one where calm, factual, Authority doesn't just win the argument, it rewrites the rules of engagement. Analysts broke down Crockett's method into 4 key elements: acknowledge emotion, redirect to facts, ask clarifying questions, and maintain a steady tone no matter the provocation. Business leaders immediately saw applications beyond politics. HR departments began using the clip in conflict resolution training. Executive coaches cited it as a model for handling tense boardroom negotiations. Even Fortune 500 companies added it to presentations on leadership under pressure. One CEO tweeted, "Every executive should study how Jasmine Crockett handled this. Masterclass leadership in real time." The viral moment also revealed a generational split. Polls showed voters under 40 overwhelmingly preferred Crockett's calm, fact-based approach, while older voters were divided. Focus groups described Conway's behavior as unprofessional and Crockett's as presidential, someone they could trust with serious decisions. Strategists quickly took note. Democrats saw Crockett's performance as a blueprint for energizing younger voters frustrated with political theatrics. Republicans, meanwhile, worried Conway's meltdown might alienate key demographics. Fundraising numbers reflected the shift. Democratic donations spiked as the clip spread across progressive networks. But the impact stretched far beyond partisan politics. Teachers used the moment in civics classes. Communications professors dissected it as an example of emotional regulation under stress. Political scientists called it the Crockett model. Proof that calm professionalism can outperform confrontation. In the social media age, clips of Crockett's steady responses far outperformed Conway's outbursts online. Younger viewers, in particular, praised her composure as a model for how political debate should work. For many, it was the first time they'd seen a politician actually listen before responding. The exchange also sparked a conversation about women in leadership. Conway and Crockett embodied 2 distinct styles: confrontation versus composure. Public reaction suggested a clear preference for Crockett's method: strength without shouting. In the end, Crockett's profile skyrocketed. She was invited to headline events, featured on major networks, and embraced as the voice of a new generation of leaders. Conway's career endured, but her credibility was bruised. Producers became cautious about pairing her with opponents who might stay calm under fire. The clash became more than a viral meme. It was a case study in political communication, proof that you can win without raising your voice, that respect and firmness are not opposites, and that in a democracy, listening is sometimes the most powerful form of leadership.